Nonetheless, Indiana women's basketball was dismantled by the Washington Huskies in their own building inside Assembly Hall. Home game against Washington, an unranked team, but one that was ranked as recently as this past weekend. Lost to Purdue on the road and kind of that Midwest trip, the Midwest swing, I guess you could say, for Washington. They lose to Purdue. They subsequently drop out of the rankings, and then they remain in the state of Indiana to take on the Indiana Hoosiers. And this time, it was a game that contained a great deal of garbage time and a game that ultimately fell in favor of the Washington Huskies. There are a few primary takeaways from this game and the results of it. Washington, very opportunistic in transition. They also dominated the paint. They nearly quadrupled Indiana in paint scoring. That goes both ways, right? Washington was able to establish a scoring rhythm with ease throughout the entire game. And on the other side, you have Indiana women's basketball, who was not quite able to do the same. They were walled off of the paint. They had to rely on outside shooting to keep pace with the Huskies throughout this game, even in their own building. And it's a situation where, again, in Bloomington, in Assembly Hall, Washington was the team that was setting the tone and dictating the pace and dictating control over this contest. And they did so with ease, and they did so impressively throughout all four quarters of this one. Early on, IU was fine because they were hitting those outside shots. I believe Maskaleski had 2 triples in the first quarter, at least. Chesky had 1 early on as well. And so Indiana was keeping pace, and the score was respectable through the first quarter. Top of my head, I don't remember what the score was at the end of the first quarter, but it was close enough to indicate that Indiana had a chance to potentially go out and win it, at least with the disparity in scoring that was on the board at that time. Nonetheless, Indiana obviously ends up moving forward throughout the contest in not quite the same way. That outside shooting tails off a little bit. Chesky was awesome. She put together an impressive scoring output and obviously, was able to put together a performance that was, potentially had the ability to carry Indiana to a victory, but unfortunately, Indiana does not just play with Shea Chesky on the floor. They have 5 players on the floor against 5 Husky players, and supporting cast offense, right? Again, not quite there for Indiana. Not consistent scoring, not consistent production, not consistent contributions from everyone else on the floor in a way that was obviously very unfortunate and obviously not enough to win, even in their own building, against a fellow unranked opponent. So again, they were fine early on. They were great from 3. I shouldn't say great, but they were certainly good from 3 throughout the entire contest. That, along with Chesky's, incredible scoring output, are probably the 2 greatest bright spots of what Indiana was able to do against Washington. But again, not much from the supporting cast. Washington was opportunistic in transition. They dominated the paint. Indiana was struggling to defend without fouling. Xania Sokaguman had, I think, 3 first-half fouls. Either it was 2 first-half fouls and then a quick foul at the beginning of the second half, or it was 3 first-half fouls. And that obviously was problematic for Indiana. And so across the board, if you're playing a team that has 40-plus points in the paint, you're looking at a team that, again, very balanced, don't even need a balanced offense. They just have a very rhythmic scoring output, with rhythmic scoring production in a way that was very, very impressive and very, very successful for the Washington Huskies. And on the other side, again, just if you control the painted area, if you control the front court to that degree, there is not necessarily going to be much of a way for your opponent to have a chance to fight against that. Washington, incredible scoring, consistent, efficient, effective, proficient, all of those words that I always use throughout the day, throughout the night. All 4 quarters, they were able to score in the paint, and that supplemented their offense a great deal. And on the other side, Indiana not able to do the same. It's kind of like football with controlling the trenches, where if Washington, think of this as a football game. Washington has that consistent run game. That opens up the offense. It opens up the playbook. It relieves some pressure from the quarterback in the passing game, and it just allows the offense to work a whole lot better. And if at the same time you're completely stopping the run on the other end, and you kind of force the other team to take more risks and take more, low percentage throws and put together some low percentage plays throughout the game, it just makes things a whole lot more difficult for the opponent to find consistency and rhythm offensively. Exactly the same in basketball with the front court. If you're controlling the paint, you're going to be able to score, especially if you're rebounding well. You're going to be able to score not only from down low, but that allows 3-point shots and some of those shots from outside to be taken a little bit more liberty, because there's an understanding that your team is probably going to get a rebound on a given possession. And then the other side, again, that the other team is relying on those outside shots, so much so that because they're not getting very much rebounding, there's not that much presence on the glass. Also, Indiana was able to succeed, or Indiana was not able to succeed in the sense of providing second chance opportunities for their shooters and for that offense. Dominant win for Washington. Those are really the takeaways, right? Washington controlled the paint so well. Turnovers were respectable for Indiana, but rebounds were not. Paint points certainly were not. And again, Washington, opportunistic in transition. It's not even so much opportunistic off the turnover. It's even, in addition to that, Washington opportunistic where they get a defensive rebound, and because they get so many, it's just instantly pushing the ball down the floor back the other way and trying to get free buckets from Indiana's misses. And that's what they were able to do throughout the contest, and that was something that was very impressive and certainly enough to win the game for Washington. They end up winning by 19. They win 82 to 63, I should say. And again, it's just one of those wins that's so deflating and so dominant in one particular area where there's not that much else to say about it, right? Chesky was great. Indiana shot well from three. That's why it was, why the scoreline wasn't worse at the end of the game. And it was certainly a reasonably respectable contest for much of the beginning of it. But this time, a lot of times Indiana collapses in the third quarter, and they were very bad in the third quarter in this game as well. But a lot of times also, Indiana's been able to sustain competition throughout the whole first half. But this time it was a second quarter where Washington was able to pull away. And again, just controlling the paint, completely dominating that front court. Supplements your own offense, very much restricts and suffocates the opposing defense. And on top of that, obviously Washington able to play well in transition despite Chesky and the Hoosiers shooting well from three. So a nice win for Washington, a nice bounce back win for that team. They were ranked. By the way, this is one of my favorite teams in Big Ten women's basketball outside of IU. Out of all the teams besides IU that I've watched this season, I just liked Washington. I like their shot making. I like their defense. I like their transition offense. And similar to Minnesota, right? I just like what they do. I like watching the team. I like watching Washington, especially in the late window. You can't sleep. You got a Washington women's basketball game on, or UCLA or USC or Oregon. All those teams are fun and interesting, and I like them all. And Washington in particular was one that I enjoyed early on in the season, particularly in their game against Utah. Just a game I enjoyed, and I knew they were going to be ranked at some point. They were not ranked when they played IU after that loss to Purdue, but certainly played with a great deal of hunger and urgency and intensity, and they were able to pick up a big win in this one. Moving forward, Indiana has a lot of time off, so a lot of time to potentially recalibrate, or a lot of time to potentially put together a bounce back or a rebound, for lack of a better word, in the middle of the season, still searching their first Big Ten win. They're not going to have a great chance to win the next one. It's at number 14, Ohio State, next Thursday. So obviously a difficult situation for the Hoosiers, but nonetheless, potentially a situation where they could pick up their first win. It's tricky, though, because Chesky has takeover potential because she takes over games all the time and, carries the team all the time. But on the other side, you have Ohio State, who obviously number 14 in the country. A lot of that has to do with Jelani Cambridge, who kind of can do the same. And it'll be interesting to see that individual matchup, similar to the matchup between Chesky and Sellers in this game. They both went off. Obviously, Sellers' supporting cast was able to do more for her offensively than Chesky's. But you see Chesky versus Jelani Cambridge. That'll be interesting. That'll be fun. Which team defends better? I don't think Indiana's going to be able to defend Jelani Cambridge. I don't think Indiana's going to be able to slow down Ohio State very much in that game. We'll have to see. Ohio State obviously looked very good in some recent games against Penn State, but nonetheless, it'll be an interesting matchup, and with a lot of rest, it'll be an opportunity for Indiana to prove itself and for Indiana to kind of prove its worth in the Big Ten moving forward. And again, just pick up that first win. There are, I believe, still 3 teams that are winless in Big Ten play in women's basketball. There might just be 2 now, but Indiana, Penn State, and Rutgers, all there at the bottom, and 3 teams are going to miss the Big Ten tournament. And you have a Northwestern team that has 1 win, and Indiana's ultimately just trying to rack up wins and just get to 15th, right? The goal is simply to get above that bottom 3, and right now there seems to be a clear bottom 3 that's almost breaking away from the pack in the wrong direction. And Indiana getting out of that group is going to be massively, massively beneficial to their postseason efforts moving forward. And we'll see if they're able to do that anytime soon, because it could be too little too late by the time they play Rutgers, by the time they play Penn State at the very end of the year. So, again, those being the last 2 games is just a killer for Indiana. They're lucky they play Purdue twice, but, playing both those teams last is, those are going to be some pivotal games potentially, but also may not really matter if both teams are out of the Big Ten Conference tournament contention. So picking up wins early and picking up wins in the middle of the season is going to be very important for the women's basketball team moving forward.